And then I found out there's like 29 institutes. And so that's the name is institutes. Just goes to show you. So go into grants and funding, and that's a pull down. And what you'll find is funding opportunities, which is important because you need to make sure that you're reading the most current announcement for the mechanism that you want to use. The forms and applications, the deadlines. Make sure you know when the deadlines are. How to apply electronically, and most of you will be able to just work through your grants office. And then there's some other resources. The reporter, your ERA Commons. Some of you may already have one. If you don't have one and you're planning to submit a grant, you have to establish an ERA Commons account. And that's really just basically a Dropbox so that you can put your grant in and NIH can privately give you your reviews and those kinds of things. And then this other stuff, we don't care. So there's many ways to go about this, but I think many of you have an idea of what kind of grant you want to apply for. So going to the NIH guide and either searching it by search term based on what you do research on, or possibly what level of grant you want. And those are over here. You can now select an institute and a funding mechanism, or just the funding mechanism, and pull up the information you need. One of the things that I want to make sure you do is make sure that you read any notices. I used to think that the notices were just dumb stuff, but the notices are very important because they sometimes have things like a deadline has changed, a budget has changed, it's gone up or it's gone down. So make sure that you also check any notices. If you have an idea, let's say you work on diabetes. Well, you've got to go to the NIDDK. You're not going to go to the Cancer Institute. Then if you know kind of which institute you might be applying to, make sure that you look at what their funding priorities are. The institutes at NIH are required every 5 years to put forth a plan, a set of research goals that they plan to achieve. And so making sure that what you're doing matches as closely as possible what they say they want to fund is going to increase your chances of getting funded. So again, here we have finding funding. I think this might work. We'll see. If it doesn't, we'll just go back to the slides. So yeah, as I said, everything's Corona, 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 Corona. So finding funding takes you to we'll take you to the NIH guide. The NIH guide used to actually be a piece of paper, like it was mimeographed or something. Okay, that's not working too good, so we'll just go back and go back to the slides. There we go. So again, on the guide, you can find, based on your keywords or the types of funding, the announcements. So homepage, due date, blah, blah, blah. But some of you might want to look at something else before you go to pull up the funding announcement. So there's a database called Reporter, the NIH Reporter. And the NIH Reporter is every grant that's been funded probably for the last, 15 or 20 years. If you don't change the dates, it just gives you the grants that exist right now. But you can use this to search for by topic. You can use it to search by institution, you can, let's say you wanted to know how many KO1s, what are the funded KO1s from NIDDK? You can pull up KO1 and you can pull up DDK, and that would give you an idea what the topics were that NIDDK is funding for KO1s or K23s or K99s. So I just pulled up my own stuff. This is kind of old, but for each of these things, what you'll see is there's a secret number, and my pointer's not, there he is, there he is. So this is a 5 years worth of funding. I mean, year 3, it's an R25, which is an education grant. It's from the Office of the Director, and this is my co-PI, and this is where the funding went, and this is when it started. These are some other grants. This is a NIAAA. So the real secret number, all of the institutes have a two-letter code for them, which you don't have to memorize. It just helps when you're looking, if you look at a lot of different grants, to know that NIDDK is DK and NHLBI is HL. This is the funding mechanism. There are a variety of mechanisms. Everything on earth is not an R01. And if someone tells you you have to have an R01 as your first grant, they're full of it. There are small R's, there are K's, there are education grants, there are psychosocial grants, etc. If you click on this, the title, it will take you to a page that describes the grant. So what you want to do is go to the NIH webpage. Let me see if I can. We'll try it here. No, thanks. So here's the reporter. I click on him. I know. So we're going to see some grants at your institution.
Dr. Gregory, we're still seeing your PowerPoint.
Oh, poop.
I think you have to change what application you're sharing.
Okay, but I don't have, okay. Ooh. Yeah, I cannot get it to give me my thing. All right.
Maybe stop sharing and then share the browser.
Let's see. Okay, there we go. Let's try that. Stop share. And then share. There we go. Sorry. I'll catch on to this. So everybody can see it now?
Perfect.
Yay. All right. So I put in University of Illinois at Chicago. And that's going to be a lot. So I think what we're going to do is look for just K's. So you can do this. Just put in wildcard and then send in the query. And it says there are 61 Ks. So this is a good thing to do because if you're planning on writing a K award, let's say a K08, because I see one right here, then here's somebody at your institution who has one. and they're probably working in a totally different field from you. So this is somebody you could contact and say, hey, could I talk to you about how you put it together? Could you tell me, how the study section went or whatever? Or you might even find somebody who not only has the same type of K you want, but maybe the same institute. So this is just the money part. If you hit this, you get what they call an abstract. It's also in the grantsmanship called a summary. Most people write the summary basically by taking their specific aims page and paring it down. So you should see basically kind of somebody's hypothesis and their specific aims. But also you can go to this tab called details, and this will tell you who the PI is, who their program officer is, where they, what their position is, etc., and when they got the money and when they're going to finish. So this person's going to be finishing up. That's important, especially if you want to ask this person maybe to share their grant with you. They're not going to want to share their K award that they just got yesterday because they just got it. But this person's almost done with their K, and you never get another K. K is for training. So this person might be more willing to share parts of their K with you since it's going to end at the end of the year. And this is the institute. So this is a great way to, again, here's a K-23. K-23s are for clinical faculty who are doing patient-oriented research. K-01s are for PhDs who need extra training past there as a junior faculty person. K-08 is for a clinical person who's doing more lab-based research and maybe needs more training and some techniques in the lab. K-24, those you don't see very often. You guys are really cool. K-24 is for mentors. So a lot of times someone who mentors a lot of junior faculty doesn't really have any protected time for that. They just kind of do it out of the goodness of their heart. K-24 is actually where you write out a plan and you have a list of people you're going to mentor, and you get your time paid for. Here's a K-99. I know there's a lot of postdocs who are in the group. K-99 is the 2 years postdoc, 2 years as a R00. So it's kind of a dual funding program. And again, if you're thinking about applying for a K-99, it might be good to talk to somebody who has a K-99 or who had a K-99. So there's 3 pages of this. It's organized basically in alphabetical order by the PI. So the other thing to use this for, it's good, again, to see if you can find somebody maybe who's close to you at your institution, or maybe in Chicago, you've got several institutions, so you might even just look in Chicago area. You can use Reporter that way to see who is working on something similar or who has similar funding to what you're looking for and might be willing to share some tips and pointers with you. What else was I going to say? I think those are the main things. For the more junior, one of the things you can look at is publications. These are publications that have been reported to come out of the grant. And for a lot of K awards, they're not going to have a lot of publications. But somebody who has an R01 definitely would have some publications that they have reported in their progress report. The other thing to use it for is when you're looking for a job. So let's say you're applied for a position and you have been asked to come for an interview. Before you go, you want to look up that school and see what kind of funding they have, who has R01s, who has big program project grants, who doesn't have R01s, and also when are those R01s running out? If the person that you're planning to collaborate with or you think you're going to work with when you get there has a grant, but it's going to run out the year after you get there, you might want to think twice. But it also makes you look smart because it gives you a real good, you can look on people's web pages and get an idea what they work on. This tells you what they're funded to work on. So when you walk in and you're interviewing and you say, oh, I was hoping I would meet with Dr. So-and-so because his grant and his research are so related to what I do, I'd really like for us to try to see if we could work together. So there's a variety of ways you can look at it. The other thing I highly suggest is that you maybe go in and pick your topic, and go through a reporter and find all the different kinds of grants on your topic. And what you will find is two things. You will find that maybe the institute you're thinking should be funding it because you're studying diabetic GI problems. Maybe Heart, Lung, and Blood is funding somebody who's doing something similar. Maybe there's something you hadn't thought of, And when we get to the success rate tables, I think that'll be important. But the other thing is to read some of these abstracts and get an idea which ones you like. I like the way they stated their aims. I like the way it was organized. It will give you an idea how to organize not only your own summary for your grant, but also, again, the summary is really just a condensed version of the specific aims page. So this will give you a good idea of how you want to organize your specific aims page for your grant, or at least give you some ideas of what you like and don't like. And some of the worst summaries are the people who've had a grant for 20 years because they've had it for 20 years. So they just write, oh yeah, we're going to do some more stuff. They're very vague. Oh yeah, we did some good stuff. We're going to do some more stuff. Give us some more money because they have, they know what's going on. And I'm not defending it. I don't think it's right, but I do think that it really is kind of how it is. All right. So back to the query form. Again, you can pick by organization. You can pick by the type of grant. You can pick by a specific institute. These are all pull downs. You can pick by the program announcement. So let's say there was a RFA or a program announcement that came out and you're like, who got funded for that? I don't know. You just type that in and it will tell you what has been funded. Okay? So this is a great place to start. Again, it gives you ideas of other institutes that might fund your research, of other funding mechanisms maybe you hadn't thought of, and of people who are maybe your neighbor who have grants that are kind of similar to what you're interested in. All right, so we're back to the front page. This is NIH.gov. That's really all you have to know. Now I'm going to tell you the absolute truth. NIH webpage has more on it than it really is. It's a lot because every institute wants to help people and they act like they're the only one with a web page, etc. But you can get anywhere you want to go from NIH.gov. All right. So let's try this. So NIH has a portfolio of success rates, and you can look for any different type of grant. The R grants are here, and the T, F, and Ks are down here. So we're going to look at career development rather than looking at the R's because the R's are a lot. And what it gives us is, where did you go? Where did you go? It's going to give us a Excel spreadsheet, which we may or may not be able to see. I know. What is wrong with this woman? She can't work anything. Anyway, the Excel spreadsheet is year by year, and it goes K01 to all the way to K99 and every institute. And for each year, how many applications there were for each of these institutes and how many things were funded. There it is. Woohoo! And it is probably the only Excel spreadsheet I actually can manipulate. I'm really scared about Excel spreadsheets. So here you go. You see it starts in 2010. And again, K01, K02, K03. I would suggest that you go back only maybe 4 years.
Sorry to interrupt, but we are not seeing it. We need, you need to reshare the screen, yeah.
Now?
Yes, great.
All right, so we're going to go back. Let's see. We're going to go, let's say, 5 years. Okay? So that's the first thing. And then we can pick any one of these Ks. But let's say you were studying something about diabetes and heart disease. So you're trying to decide on NHLBI or NIDDK. So we can go over here and pick NHLBI, NIDDK. And now it's going to show us the Ks only for those two institutes. So K01s, K08s, K22, K23, K24, K25, K99. Let me just briefly describe these different Ks. There's this thing called the K kiosk. I don't think you need it. The K01 again is a PhD junior faculty. K08 is a clinical faculty who wants to do laboratory research or get training in laboratory research. K22 is different for every institute, so it depends on your institute. K23 is patient-oriented research. You do need to be a healthcare professional to apply for that one. But that means pharmacists, DOs, etc. It's not just MDs. K25 is for people who are like chemists, physicists, etc., who now are changing and want to apply their skills to a biological problem and need training in basically in biology. And the K99 is the 2-year. So it's 2-year senior postdoc training into 2 years as a R00. So for each of these things, you can see this is the number of applications they got and the number that were awarded and what the success rate is. And what we can see pretty quickly is there are more applications to DDK, but there's also a higher percent were funded. And then for some years, for some mechanisms, they're going to be almost the same. So what you want to do is decide, which is the best for you. And it looks like with the K20, let's stay away from K22. So for example, here for the K23, if you had to choose and you're doing both heart and diabetes, then I would suggest that you might want to choose the NIDDK because the success rate is much higher. But I would also say look over, the K23 for multiple years because sometimes there was a year when there was more money than another year. And don't apply for K25 to NIDDK because 0% success rate. Just kidding. But also do look at how many applications they awarded. How many applied. We had one come up with a 50% success rate, and I was like, oh man, that's really great. Yeah, only 2 people applied, and they only funded one of the 2. So I don't know that that's the best institute to go for. And it goes through 2019. They're gathering the data now for the 2020. But again, this is a great way if you think that there might be 2 different Ks that you would qualify for, or if you think that there are 2 different institutes that your research might fit under. So we had a person who was working in leukemia. So she was doing cancer. She was a clinician, and she was analyzing patient samples, but she was analyzing them in the lab. So she could go K08 or K23. The success rates were almost the same. So that was a little confusing. So then she actually called her program officer, and she had sent him her specific aims page to talk to him about, what he thought was the better mechanism. And he said, listen, I'm going to tell you, apply for the K23. It's a little under applied for, so you might do better. She applied for the K23. She indeed did get it. So this table, I think, is really helpful. A lot of people don't know it's there, even a lot of big PIs, because all they grew up doing was writing R01s. Any questions about the success rate stuff?
There is one question so far about funding options for a postdoc with a J1 visa. I don't know if that's something that you could speak to.
So the K99 is one of the only Ks and no F that someone who doesn't have a green card can apply for. So K99, highly recommended.
Great, thank you.
All right. So don't forget this. It's easy, NIH.gov, and then success rates. I could tell you no, we don't want to save it. That was nice, but thank you. Screen sharing stopped. Okay. And we're going to share the screen again and go back to this guy. All right. So this is, again, can everybody see this? I have to kind of check you guys. Okay, thanks. Because I am seeing it and I go off on a tangent and I'm like, oh, oops, nobody was there. So I did mention about going to the guide, but here we can actually just go to the guide. And so find funding. So this is by date. Again, we could pick a funding mechanism. Let's try a K01. And then we should get only those, like here's a special notice of interest. Here's the parent award that just came out. This is a program announcement, PA. 20 means that's the year that it came out. And then it just has some number. We don't care about that number so much. So this program announcement came out May 7th. So this is hot off the press. This is your hot K01 announcement. And there's actually 2 of them now. Used to be, there was just one, but they've now separated out for clinical trial required or no clinical trial. Okay. And this is when it's going to end, the program announcement. So program announcements are really long-term announcements. They're usually like this is 3 years at a time, 3 to 5 years, depending on the program. And RFAs, requests for applications, are very short-term. They're like usually a one-shot deal. There's a lot of COVID money that's coming out as RFAs. So if you were already working on COVID, or you're already an infectious disease expert and you have a bunch of your patients, you might fit with an RFA. And the beauty of the RFA is It's pretty specific and it has a quick turnaround. So if you don't have any data, don't apply for an RFA. Well, to be honest, if you don't have any data, don't apply for any grant. You have to have data. No matter what the program announcement says, oh, no data, yeah, that's not true. You need data. Okay, so let's go to this one. This is the list of institutes that support this K01. And what I noticed is I don't see my little friend NIDDK. And the reason I don't see my friend NIDDK, which I didn't realize at first, is because NIDDK has its very own K01. So if you're doing NIDDK research or diabetes research or digestive research or kidney research, make sure you find the program announcement that's specific, that they have made specific. Now, in this announcement, one of the things that they will suggest you do is go to this table of contacts. Once you've decided on an institute, make sure you go to that table, because what the table tells you is any things that are unique to that institute for that K. I cannot say it enough. Every institute handles the K awards a little bit differently. They have slightly different rules about things. Some of them have different pay lines, have different salary support caps, have different funding for research caps, etc. So once you know which institute you want to go to, make sure that you read this thing. Plus, it has the contacts that you need to contact the program officers for that mechanism. Does that make sense? Maybe, sort of. Okay. Now, in here, this is the announcement. This is everything. All the rules and regulations, what they will fund, what they won't fund, who's eligible, who's ineligible, who the PIs can be, cost sharing, blah, 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 blah. And then it tells you there's a special section in this grant for the candidate information, the mentors, the environment, etc. And then it tells you what needs to go in those sections. Read this. Read it. I tell people all the time, did you read the instructions? Oh, yeah, I looked up. No. Read it. Describe your commitment. Describe prior training. Describe your research. Just show evidence that you've been productive, etc. These are really critical components because these are the things that the reviewers are told to look for. So if you are writing this with the reviewer in mind, the reviewer will like your grant. Just saying. And if they like it, they give you a better score. All right, so it's all laid out here. And then at the very bottom, all the administrative things. Hopefully you have business managers and people like that who help you with that. For the scientific research context, it again goes to that table because for each different institute, there's a different program officer for the Ks. Most, and I won't say 100%, but most of the K program officers at NIH are people who've been chosen who are really good at working with junior people and want to help people get their grant. Okay? So we've seen the reporter as a way to find other people working in your area. I forgot to tell you one other thing about reporter. Reporter can tell you who else is working, who else has maybe the same kind of grant or is working in the same area as you. It's really important that you make sure that you make your grant look different from the grant that's already funded that might be similar. Because as a reviewer, I go to reporter to see who else is working on this, who else has funding for this? Should we fund this person? So make sure that if you find something that sounds similar to what you're working on, that you make your title different, very different, so that it stands out as being different, not, oh, another person doing the exact same study. You don't want that going against you. And the other thing for a reporter, I use it a lot for like spy mission, for job interviews, but also you can use reporter to, sometimes people find collaborators and or mentors. So I've had people who had human samples who found somebody with a mouse model of the disease they're studying, or somebody who needed a mentor for a specific skill set, and they wanted to get this very junior person. And I said, well, can't we see if there's somebody who's funded by this institute to do this kind of technique, who you could maybe approach as a mentor? Oh, that's a good idea. So be sure you use all the tools at your disposal for these, for your search. No. And where's my thing? Stop share and share.
We've had a couple questions come in. Is this a good time?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Gosh, I don't know if everyone heard that thunder. So one question is, are postdocs that graduated more than 5 years ago still eligible for the K-99?
No.
Okay, no. Black and white. Is there
there's always some gray, like there is a little more leeway now. Let's say you graduated, but you took a year off with your kids or with a sick parent, like an MFL. You might be able to again, you have to talk to the program officer. But usually they're pretty strict about that, because they'll look at your bio sketch and say, oh no, you're not eligible. So you don't want to spend all your time writing the K-99 to find out you're not eligible for it.
Okay.
Next question.
Great. Another eligibility question: for a J1 visa holder who has an early career award from DoD, are they eligible to apply for a K award?
That's one that may vary by institute. So we had someone with an American Heart Junior Investigator Award. Her institute, she went to the Aging Institute. They said, yeah, that's fine. We don't mind. So again, a lot of the eligibility questions are not black and white. You need to talk to the program officer.
Great. And last question so far. Is there a salary table for postdoc, I believe is the question, if they're hired under an NIH project? And if so, can the PI choose to pay less than that minimum?
Yes, there is. Just go to nih.gov. In the search thing, put in postdoc salary or stipend, and they have all the stipend tables. No, you're not allowed. If the person is on, when you do your progress report, it won't go through, I don't think, if you are trying to pay them less than what NIH's scale is. What some people do, though, is they'll say, well, I'm paying 75% of your salary at such and such a rate. Where the other, they need to explain where the other 25% is coming from or whatever. But okay. Yeah, you can look those up and be sure you do.
A couple more questions. Is it possible to write a K award for an institution other than the institution you're currently at? So could you write a K to work with a mentor who's at another institution?
So yes, you can have mentors who are not at your institution, number one. But writing one to go to another institution, let's say you're a senior postdoc and you want to write a K01 for where you're going to have a job. I would get it drafted up and ready to go, but it has to have a home institution wherever you have that faculty position.
Okay, great. And then a last question for now. Are you, sorry, I lost it.
So,
Are nonprofit organizations able to apply for NIH funding?
nonprofit organizations. Yeah, yeah, but I'm not sure. Yes. Okay. So you could apply for a regular R, small R, R03, R21 grant. You could apply for the small business grants, the SBIRs and STTRs. Any, you can apply for any type of R research grant. You can't apply for the K, the training parts from a nonprofit of any kind. Absolutely.
Okay.
Hey, they expect it to be at some kind of training institution like a university.
A couple more questions are coming in.
Yay.
Are there opportunities for beyond the K-99 for postdocs with J1 visas? And then a similar question, or I get maybe it's not similar, but what is the major distinction between the K-8 and the K-23? So there's been a couple questions about asking to clarify the different mechanisms a little bit more.
Okay, first off, you need to pull up and look up the program announcement and read it. But a K-08 is for a clinical person. You have to be faculty, and you're doing more laboratory-based research. K-23 is patient-oriented research. So you're doing more with the patients and patient samples, etc. More like a clinical trial. Think of it, K-23 is more like having a clinical trial versus a K-08 being look at stuff in the lab that's from humans, and you are a clinical person and you have to be faculty. The J1, I can't comment too much about the J1 visa. I'm not an expert on it. What I do, is there something for somebody who's past the 5 years? You need some kind of semi-faculty position. We have this exact problem at our university, people who, for whatever reason, were postdocs longer than 5 years. And so I've been trying to help them work on mechanisms, but it's really challenging because unless at our school, they will let a postdoc be a PI on a small R grant, but it's not going to be successful because you're going to come in with people who have, years of experience, and then you're just, like a super postdoc. So what I suggest for the PhD level people who have that is that they try to get something like an instructor position and apply for the K01.
And we had a similar question for a research assistant professor. Would that be a similar situation where the K01 would be most appropriate?
Yes, anything where you have any type of faculty, you cannot do a K99. You have to do a K01.
Okay.
And the thing about the Ks that everybody needs to understand, the K is not to pay for your research. The K is to help you get some training that you need in order to become independent. So we had someone who was a critical care pulmonary faculty who was interested in the impact of alcohol on muscle wasting in ICU patients. So she got a K23. What she said in her K23, which I helped her write, was, I know lots about ICU patients. I know a little bit about ICU patients with muscle wasting. What I don't really know is about ways to measure alcohol and about microRNA markers for muscle wasting. So that was her plan, was to learn those new things while doing the research. If you don't have anything you need to learn, you're not going to get a K. It's not an R. It's not a little R. It is the training and the career development is a critical component of that type of grant.
All right. We can move on, like you can let me know when you'd like to continue, but we have one more question. If you get a K-99 and start a new position at a different institution during the K period, can you bring the funds with you to the new institution?
That depends on the institute. Usually, if you have a reasonable plan of how you're going to be mentored, and you're still going to be a postdoc, then you can do that. You just work with your program officer. You have to write, maybe a new career plan or something like that. If you are leaving and let's say you start your K-99 and 1 year in, you get offered a job, you can say, I want to do my R00 early. The K-99 and the R00 are considered almost separate applications. You have to reapply for your R00 and prove that you've done the things you said you'd do in your K-99 before they're going to give it to you.
All right, I think it's probably a good time to move on if you'd like to move on.
Okay, so can we see my slides or no?
Yes, we can see the slides.
Okay. Oh, it tells me at the bottom, you are screen sharing. Ah. All right, so we did this. Again, compare success rates for different funding mechanisms like K08, K23. I know you're like, well, how are they? You said they weren't different. A lot of times there will be overlap. If you're a clinician who is getting patient samples and you're looking at them in the lab, you could go for either one. Go for the one where you're going to be most successful. Compare success rates for different institutes. If you're studying how diabetes affects the heart, you might be able to go to DDK or to the heart. And you kind of emphasize whichever one of those in your grant, but make sure that you're going to the one where you're going to have the most success. Be sure to check any unique rules about the funding mechanisms. That's that table. So once you decide on an institute, make sure you go to that table and also talk to the program people. All right, so we looked at success rates. Oh, last thing, very important, very important. There are full grants available on the NIH webpage with personal information redacted. So again, NIH.gov, sample grants. These are all through NIAID, which is allergy and infectious disease. Excuse me. But that doesn't really matter. A grant is a grant is a grant. So there are K awards, there are R03s, R21s, R01s. And you can even look up if you just need a specific thing. I had to write a multi-PI plan. I didn't know what a multi-PI plan was. I knew that two of us were going to work on this grant together. Excuse me. So I just went to the sample grants and I put in multi-PI. It pulled up a grant with a multi-PI plan in it. So these are really helpful. So again, here, these are some, not only do you get the full application, which includes, budget and things like that might be redacted, like somebody's salary is redacted, but most of the information on like, what do you write in a budget justification? How's it supposed to look? Those kinds of things will be there. And the summary statement, which means what the reviewers, what scores they gave, what did they think were strengths, and what did they think were weaknesses of this particular grant. So again, you can see there's R01s, R03s, R21s, and now there's K awards in this same thing. And small business. So somebody asked about the nonprofits. If you have something where either you could start a business, like maybe you're developing a test for something, or you are going to partner with a business, you can apply for these R41, R42, R43, etc. those are woefully under-applied for. So you should definitely think about, using those if you can. So this was just to kind of say, let's do a little brainstorming. What are some ideas? What are some things? I mean, I think our audience is kind of quite varied. I think there's some of you who need to apply for small R's, and an R03 and an R21 are just 2-year grants that that have small money, but they are designed to get you some data to then be competitive for an R01. There are program announcements specifically for R03s, and some of the institutes like NCI uses the R03s and R21s for very specific things that they want somebody to study. They don't have a program announcement. The last thing I think in strategizing is, once you kind of come up with an idea of where you should go, which institute, what mechanism, and you have your project kind of hashed out, you should contact the program officer. You should email them your current biosketch and your specific aims page. And when you email it to them, say, I would like to make an appointment to talk to you by phone about applying for the so-and-so mechanism. The reason you want to make an appointment is you were sending them something they can read in advance and get an idea of what it is you want to work on. And they have to be very careful, because they work for the government, as to what they put in writing. So emailing somebody, a program officer, and back and forth to get questions answered, you could get much more accomplished in one conversation. Also, even if they don't say it outright, you can tell by somebody's tone of voice. If you say, well, I think that the K-23 is just not right for you. Or I would highly suggest blah, 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 blah. You can get a lot of kind of non-direct information by talking to them. The other thing is, if that's where you're going to be applying, you want them to know you, and not in a bad way. So don't call them 50 times, okay? But you want them to know your name and what you're working on, and to kind of give you some feedback about, do they think this is an appropriate study for this particular institute? Sometimes I've had some of the program officers say, I don't think you're right for this, but we have a grant funding coming out next month that I think will be perfect for this study. So I do think it's really important, as soon as you kind of get things gelled as far as your project and where you think you want to go with that project, to contact those program people and get them to help you. That's their job. Their job isn't just doing study section. Their job is to try to give people feedback, because the better the grants are that come into study section, the happier the reviewers are, and the happier the reviewers are, the happier the program people are. So make sure that you do that. And again, you can't say, I'm sending this in next week, could you look at it? No, far in advance, because if they have any substantive changes that they feel need to be made, you need to hear that so that you have enough time to make those changes. So those are my main strategizing components for any grant, every grant, any grant. Play with Reporter, look at the success rate tables, talk to the people in charge to make sure you're eligible. There are a lot of questions about, what kind of visa you have, et cetera. You have to ask that institute as far as that mechanism, et cetera. But I do think there are lots of mechanisms that people don't consider or just never heard of. So I'll give you an example. I have a grant. I have had, at one point, I had 3 of these T35s. So the T35s are for short-term training for professional students. So it can be dental students, optometry, whatever. So I wrote a grant. My first one was to NHLBI for medical students. My second one was for NIDDK. And my third one, I wanted to write one to the Alcohol Institute because our school, New Orleans, has a huge alcohol center. Imagine we study alcohol abuse in a city where we drink a lot. Anyway, so I went to Reporter. I couldn't find any T35s that had been funded by this institute. So I went to the PI of the head of the center and I said, I really want to apply for this. We have plenty of people to be mentors for these students, et cetera, but there's not any funded T35s. I don't understand. Is there something secret handshake or something? So he said, well, let me call them and see, I'll talk to our person. So he emailed the person emailed him back and said, the usual, oh, we would welcome your application. Yeah, whatever. The second email, the person said, actually, no one ever applied for one. So I am not only the first T35, I'm the only T35, but that's not a bad thing. So you want to make sure that you really don't just focus on, I have to have an R01, make sure that you find the right mechanism for you and for what your research interest is. Make sure you know what else is out there. Use the Reporter. Make sure you know what the success rates are, what the likelihood is, and make sure, talk to the program person more than once before you go in. And the other reason to do that is once your grant goes in and gets reviewed, that's the person you have to talk to about what the reviewer said. And so because they kind of already know you, it makes the conversation much easier. And also you can kind of get an idea where you stand. Let's say you get a score. If you get a score with a K, you're not going to get a percentile. So don't even anticipate that. You're just going to get a score. And so your program officer can give you an idea what they consider might be the pay line. And also, the pay line for Ks changes all the time. For different institutes, different pay lines. So you want to make sure that you have a good conversation with that person. Some institutes are more trainee friendly than others. NIDDK, I have one grant from them, but I really like them a lot. And that is because they score all trainee grants, T, F, and K. Nobody gets triaged if you're a trainee. And they believe that trainees need full review and full feedback. So it's a little more work for the program people, but other institutes would just give you you got triaged, here's a couple comments. So that is helpful. So questions?
So we have a couple more questions. A couple questions about nonprofits. Again, going back to that topic. One question is, does a nonprofit count as a business? So you mentioned the SBIRs, STTRs. And then another similar question about, let me get back to it. As a clinical doctorate, who also runs a nonprofit, what are the possibilities for that situation?
So you're right. I mean, a nonprofit isn't a business, but a nonprofit could partner with a business. Let's say you have a nonprofit that's an educational thing and you want to partner with somebody who does apps, and you want to make a health related app. That is something that you could get NIH funding for. So it partly depends on what the project is, what the nonprofits can apply for NIH funding for research. That there's no reason not to. They just can't apply for training because training is considered needs to be at an institution that does training. A physician in a nonprofit could apply for a grant, a research grant, an R03, R21, etc. But if that physician wanted to do their K at the nonprofit, I think they would have to be associated with a university of some type. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, if not, then they will let me know. um, one more question. If you don't get a K within your 5-year postdoc, can you apply for another K?
Yes. Yeah. So let's say you timed out for the K99 and you got a job. So now you're an instructor, or you're a research assistant professor or something, whatever you want to call those things. You can apply for a K01.
All right,
And I
great
do
time
think,
for any more questions.
yeah, and I do think the KO1s are overlooked. A lot of we actually brought in a couple junior faculty who came in as like instructor, and we're going to work really hard with them to help them get a KO1. And once they got that funding, then we could move them on to a regular faculty position and then help them get their R. Are there?
Okay, so are there eligibility requirements for the Mid-Career Training Award?
The Mid-Career Training
I think
Award?
you mentioned the K, the one for mentoring.
Yes. So that you need a track record of having mentored students or trainees in the past. That's one of the biggest criteria. And then to have a plan, usually they like a theme. So we had somebody who works on HPV and cancer, and he had 3 junior people he was going to mentor. That was his plan. They were all going to be working on HPV, one for this kind of cancer, one for this portion, etc. So really, they're looking for a track record of mentoring, of training, and in particular, most K-24s are frequently clinical faculty who don't, they don't have any protected time to mentor.
The question asker clarified that they were talking about the K-18.
K-18, you're going to have to talk to the program officer because that's a really unique and rare K. I don't know a lot about it.
Okay, what is the K-18? I have not heard of that one.
I don't know.
Okay.
What did they say?
um, yeah, so that's something to investigate separately. Another question, if your K award was not discussed, what should be your course of action?
Talk to the program officer. Because one of the problems with the K is there is a time limit. With an R01, you could send it in, now you can send it in multiple times. But let's say it was not discussed. Find out where were you? Obviously, you were in the lower 50%. Do you still fit within the timetable? Are you still going to be able to, be eligible? I have had people who got scored but not a fundable score, who the Institute actually kind of grandfathered them in because by the time they got back their scores, they were almost out of time. And they said, oh, well, we'll work with you because you're so close to getting funded. We don't want you to time out just because of, waiting on the reviews. So the institutes will try to work with you.
Now we got a question about finding a program officer. You mentioned a little bit about searching for program officers through Reporter. You can find out the program officer associated with a particular grant.
Go go to that table. So if you pick a K08, go to the K08 table, and let's say you want a K08 from NCI, there's the program officer right there on the table, and any special rules about the K08 that NCI has.
And you got that from the program announcement?
Yes.
The description? Okay, great. So
yeah. So go to the program announcement, and for all the Ks, not for ours, but for the Ks, they have those tables. It's always like, there's a little paragraph right after the list of institutes. There's always that, and you click on it. Every once in a while, the link's not good, but most of the time the link is good. And again, it's just by institute, and then on one side it'll say scientific contact, and on the other side, on the right-hand side, it'll have any special, unique things, rules that institute has.
we got a question a little earlier that I think you did address it, but maybe you can say another word or two about it. What would you say is the main distinction between the K and the R? And I think I would expand that to say, when are you ready for an R as opposed to a K?
So career development. So the K, you are scored on your career development plan. You are scored on yourself, the candidate. You're scored on your mentors. You're scored on your environment. All of that is just about the training to get you to make the transition to independent. R01, it's, are you a good scientist? Do you have the tools you need? Is this a good idea? So the R expects you to be independent. The K expects you to say, I know these things, but I need to learn some more things before I feel like I can be competent to do this research. And I've got these people in place to help me.
Great. Next question is, can a highly scored but non-funded K be helpful when applying for a first faculty position?
Absolutely. Because you know what you tell them? You're going to take out the career development part of this K. Here's my research, my first R level grant. This is my R21 or R03 that I'm going to send as soon as I become faculty. Or K01. You could send it back in as a K01, depending on, what you do. So the science part is organized for the Ks, is organized exactly like for an R. So that part's not different. What is different is this component about, your career and stuff. If that doesn't get funded, take the career, throw it away, add some more data, and send it in as an R.
All right, any more questions?
And I'm going to say it one more time. Every institute uses the Ks a little differently. So you have to talk to the people at that institute about that K. Are you eligible? What are their rules? Have you timed out, et cetera, et cetera. So strategizing to make sure you pick the best institute. Then you go and you talk to that person about, is my research going to fit? Do I fit the eligibility criteria, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, next question. When we're scored by environment, is that our institution? So what exactly are they considering by your environment?
Your institution, your labs. If you are proposing to do genome-wide sequencing, you better tell me that you've got sequencing at your institution, and you got somebody there that's going to help you with the sequencing or whatever. So environment is on every grant. You get scored on environment for R01, you get scored on environment for a K. But I think for the K, they're looking at the environment. If you are learning a new technique, it may not be in your environment. You might have to go to a school down the street to learn this new thing. So you would write about that as well. And there's nothing wrong with saying, we don't have this at our place, but I can go to such and such lab and learn how to do this thing.
I'm glad you brought that up. There was a question earlier that I answered on the side, but involving having mentors or having resources at other institutions.
Always. You should not ever apply for a K with only one mentor. You need a mentoring team. And so most of the time that's going to be, if you're a postdoc, that's going to be the person you're postdoc with plus some other people. And some of those people could be just career mentors, people who are going to help you with how do I get, what do I need to do to prepare for tenure, or how do I get a job, etc. But let's say there's a couple different techniques you need to learn. You may not be able to learn those only from one person. So there's nothing wrong with having, I think it looks better to have, you don't want 10 people that do the same thing. I reviewed a grant once, and the person had 5 people who were all cardiology researchers, and they all studied the same exact thing. And I was like, why does she need 5 of them? Pick one of those and then one to do some other thing, and you'll be good. But I do think it's important to make sure you have your bases covered. Make sure you have a mentor who is funded by the institute you're applying to. Now, that doesn't have to be your primary mentor. Let's say you are working in a lab that works on mitochondria, and maybe you want to learn about mitochondria and aging. Find somebody who works in aging and who is funded in aging. Then you can say, I work on mitochondria, but I have this guy who's an expert on aging. He's going to teach me a lot of stuff about aging, or whatever.
Can you comment on how much difference the mentor makes?
Big, huge difference. So, if the purpose of the K is to help you make a career transition, you have to have somebody on your mentoring team who's senior, who has a track record of training people. So maybe the person you're working with right now is kind of junior, you're their first postdoc, or maybe just their second postdoc or something. Then add in you want all these things to complement each other. They're not just little islands. They need to kind of complement each other. So let's get a senior person who has a big track record of training, who maybe has a different skill set, and that person's going to kind of help bolster your mentoring.
Great. Another question about roles. What is the difference between a co-I and a consultant, and would they be considered mentors?
No, consultant. Well, there's no co-I is a mentor is part of your grant. They're either a mentor if you're in a K, or if you're writing an R, they're a co-I. There, okay. A consultant is somebody you pay. So, so like you're going to use the so-and-so machine, and this guy says he's going to help teach you how to use the machine. Is he being a mentor? Are you planning to use that machine for the rest of your career? Maybe not. Maybe you just need it to run these samples. Then that person's a consultant, and you get a consulting letter from them. And that's different from being a collaborator who's providing you with samples, or providing you with, we'll analyze this, you analyze that. The mentors are people who actually are adding to your training.
All right. Another institution question. If you have mentors at different institutions, does it matter from which institution you submit?
Well, it should be the one you're at.
Yeah, it should be the one that you are working at.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where your mentors are coming from.
Right. Now, people will often ask me about, does my mentor have to be here? At least one of your mentors needs to be close. Now, y'all are in Chicago, so there's lots of schools there, Loyola, blah, 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 blah. We are very small. In New Orleans, we have basically 2 major research institutions, LSU and Tulane. But often I'll have postdocs who are Tulane who'll have a mentor at LSU. And we say, we're 3 blocks apart. It's easy for us to meet. It's easy us to go to the labs, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes we don't have somebody with the skill set we need. And we go up the road to this place called UAB. And we've, built that into some people's career plan, in that I'm going to go and spend a week up there. I can talk to, now we have Zoom. I can Zoom with them, blah, blah, blah. So if you have mentors who are offsite, you need to build it into the plan of when am I going to meet with them? How am I going to meet with them? Am I going to go physically be in their lab and learn something and then keep in touch? Or, how's that going to work? The biggest mistake people make in the career development plan, number one, is to discount it. Oh, it's not that important. If you don't have a plan, I have someone who had a K99 who got turned down because they were like, you don't need a K. You're so smart. You don't need a K. So have a very clear plan for your career. Have a very clear description of each of your mentors. And what your mentors need to bring out in their letters is, this is what I'm doing with this person. I know them. I've worked with them. And this is what we're doing together. This is my track record of training people. And this is my commitment. I'm very committed to training people. And so those are things that aren't always obvious, just from saying, mentor letters, not just, yeah, this is a great guy. It needs to be very specific as to what role they're going to play. Because what we're looking for is are you going to be hooked to this mentor forever and never become independent? What is their plan to help you become independent? Do we have more questions? I thought I saw one.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions. Does the primary mentor need to be at the same institution? You mentioned that one of your mentors should be.
It usually your primary mentor will be at the same institution. But sometimes, for a variety of reasons, that isn't how it goes. You just need to make sure that you have a plan of how you're going to work with that primary mentor if they're not there. And why aren't you where they are? That's one of the things the reviewers go, well, if you're working with them, why aren't you just there?
This is an interesting question. Your PhD advisor, do they have any role? What should they provide a letter of support for you?
Yes, because, the K99 for sure, you have not only the mentor letters, but you usually have letters of recommendation. And so that could come from your PhD mentor.
Okay, great. I think with the 2 institutions question, there was a follow-up about working at UIC and UIUC. I would think at that point, that's kind of a specific question that you can discuss with those mentors.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts on that?
No, I don't have any idea.
Okay, yeah, I think that's something between you and your specific mentors. What makes the most sense for you?
Yeah. So the last thing I want to say is, if you are applying for a K, there's a page, candidate background. This is not where you repeat your bio sketch. Do you hear me? Are you there? Do not repeat your bio sketch. Yes, you need to tell where you went to school, if you've published certain papers. Use this area to make yourself stand out. So, for example, I had a postdoc and he was applying for K99. First sentence said, I've always been interested in genetic research, blah, blah, blah. Second sentence says, I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college. Now, what does that tell us about this guy? Without him saying, I'm a hard worker, I've kind of come up through with no help from anybody, right? But he didn't have to say that. He just said but it also gives us a sense about him that we wouldn't get from just reading his bio sketch and where he went to school. We didn't, how would we know? So try to bring out something about you and how you got interested in the field that you're interested in, or what's unique about you. And then towards the end of the candidate section, a new ploy that I have used recently, if you have a paper that's in review, you cannot put that in your bio sketch, but you can put it in your candidate section. The work that we did recently has been submitted and is in review at such and such, So the reviewers have a sense of how productive you are, because that's one of the things that they're looking for, is how productive you are, how many papers have you published. But the candidate background section should not just be, I'm good, I got these papers, I went to this school, blah, blah, blah. Give me a sense of who you are. Tell me, not a story, but something that makes me more interested in you, that I feel you're a good candidate. Okay?
That's great advice that I don't think we hear very often. So you should bring some of yourself into the application. It shouldn't be dry.
Right. Right. I mean, because we got your bio sketch. Why do we want your bio sketch twice? Okay, any other questions?
Can you put a manuscript that is in press in your bio sketch?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Make sure, not in your bio sketch. No, not in press. Well, in press. In press means it's been, it's kind of,
What if it's like available online already through the journal?
Yeah, if it's available online through the journal, that's fine. Otherwise, I would put it in my candidate section. And then you can always, the one thing you're allowed to update is as soon as it is published, you can update, send that to the reviewers.
This isn't a question that's come through, but what is your feeling on preprints?
What is my feeling
Do you
about?
do you have an opinion about including preprints, or like getting your work, putting your work on a preprint server as a strategy to
Increase?
describe your productivity?
Here's the thing. You walk a fine line, because one of the things you need to include in your proposal is preliminary data. Preliminary data by definition is not published. So, yes, you want to look like you're productive and you've written papers and things, but you also want to make sure that you have some preliminary data. This preliminary data led us to write this proposal, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's kind of a fine balance. But I think it is really important that you show your productivity. I got these papers as a, post as a graduate student, I have so and so. You can highlight those again in your candidate section, but I just don't make it only about how many papers you have. I think one of the most interesting things is, especially for postdocs, how did you pick this lab? I met I got a travel award and went to this meeting, and at the meeting I met Dr. So-and-so and talked to him then I ended up in his lab. Now you've bragged about two things. You bragged that you got the travel award as a student, and then you met this person and you were so impressed about their work and talked to them, and now you're their postdoc. So it's a more interesting way of saying, instead of just saying, I went to this, I did this, blah, blah, blah.
We've got a question about the review process.
Uh-huh.
How long is the review process? Is it shorter than an R?
Nope. But the one thing, I'm so glad you brought that up. The other thing I have to pound into your head, the case study sections are not going to be as specific as those study sections for an R. So when you're writing your specific aims or whatever, don't write it like you're writing a journal article. You're not. These are not all experts. They're going to be people, let's say you're writing about diabetes, they're going to know about diabetes, they're going to know about, some stuff, but they won't know maybe the molecule you're looking at. They also will be people who know about training. So they're going to be looking at two things. So you just need to be a little more clear in your explanation. You don't just jump in, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, how did they get there? And that's where it's important especially with the K, to have somebody who's not an expert on that field read it. At least your specific aims page. Have your mentor read it, yes, but he knows all the stuff too. So then have somebody who doesn't know anything about it read it and say, yeah, this makes sense. This is logical. I don't really know if it's the right experiment, but it makes sense to me. So, try to make sure that you go from that big problem, health problem, to the area that you're interested in, and then what specific things you're going to look at. So that it's logical progression. And don't let anybody tell you that there's a specific way you have to format your grant. There's a company that goes around and teaches this grant writing course. I don't even know their name. If you look at the sample grants, which are all funded grants, not one of them has a format. There's certain things that are there, like the specific aims. You have to say what your aims are and what your hypothesis is. But this, you got to say this and say that. No, you don't. No. Write it the way you write. When I edit people's grants, I try to keep them as much the way the person writes as possible, because it's their grant. It's not my grant.
So we got another great question about this transition aspect. So the question is, can you write a grant as a postdoc with a future PI that you want to work with? So you're not working with them now, but you want to work with them. And if so, does the current PI have a role in providing a recommendation letter?
So if you write a K-99, you're going to write it with the current PI, but with the future PI as on your mentoring team. And I saw somebody do this, and he had two mentors at Duke and he was at NIH. And so as soon as he got his K-99, he finished up, and guess where he got a job? At Duke, with his mentors that he had been working with for 2 years, who got to know him and really liked him and said, hey, we want you to come and be faculty here. So you can include both, but you really need that primary mentor. If you can, have that person be there, and then include the person you'd like to have in the future, as part of your mentoring team. Okay. I think we wore some people out. Yeah.
All right, let me see if I've gotten any more private questions. Yeah, I think maybe we are all set. Should we include the future PI as a mentor? Follow-up question to the previous one. I think you said yes, that they should be on your mentoring team.
Plus, then you find out if you really want them to be your future PI. All right, so we're going to take a little break, and we'll get back those people on the mock study section.
All right, so we got a lot of thank yous. So I want to thank you as well for sharing your knowledge with us. I feel like we got some good inside scoop on some things. I learned a couple things myself. Just to everyone, last bit of housekeeping, please watch out for an evaluation. We will send out an evaluation form. Please submit that back to us. It's very helpful in planning future offerings. So again, lots more thank yous. I really appreciate your time, Dr. Gregory, and this was really, really wonderful. So, oh, you're muted.
Thanks for helping me with my how do I show the web page and stuff. Yeah, sometimes it's just simple things that are hard. But it's so much more helpful to use the like reporter and show somebody how it works than just to show that still picture. So I'm going to take a break, go get a cup of coffee, and come back and be ready for study section.
All right, so if you are staying for the next session, Jacqueline, I believe there's a separate invitation for that, right?
Yeah, there's a separate Zoom invitation for that. So make sure to log off here and log into the separate Zoom account. Well, I'll send the recording of today's presentation with the email that I send out for the evaluation. So as long as you registered and you're on that list, you'll get that.
All right. Any last questions, logistical questions?
I see a couple more. Again, for the second session, log off. And I think you should have been sent an Zoom information. You'll log into that.
All right, great.
Okay, I'm going to log out now and get the other one set up.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.